Hi guys, welcome back to the Cinefile. Before starting, let me take you back to the year 2016. Now I know you might say, oh yes, that was the pre-TikTok era, but don't worry, I'm not here to talk about that. Instead, let's focus on what was happening in cinema back then. In 2016, two of the biggest movies from two of the biggest superhero franchises were lined up for release. On one side, Marvel Studios was preparing to drop Avengers Infinity War, a film that was set to be a game changer in their carefully crafted Marvel Cinematic Universe saga. On the other side, DC was gearing up for the long-awaited Justice League, a movie that was supposed to completely shift the direction of the DC extended universe. Fans were hyped, critics were buzzing, the stage was set for a head-to-head clash between Marvel and DC on the big screen. Now fast forward a bit, what actually happened? Well, Infinity War received massive applause from both audiences and critics. It was an event, one of those rare cultural moments that united millions around the globe. People laughed, people cried, people gasped in shock when Thanos snapped half the universe away. It was cinema history. Meanwhile, Justice League, well, it mostly gathered controversies. Instead of being remembered for its story or its characters, it was remembered for behind-the-scenes chaos, reshoots, clashing visions between Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon, the infamous CGI mustache removal, and endless online debates. Fans didn't unite around the film, they argued about it. Because of that contrast, Marvel marched forward with confidence. They gave fans Infinity War and then capped off their entire saga with Endgame, a breathtaking conclusion to over a decade of storytelling. It was peak Marvel. For fans, it was everything they had hoped for. Meanwhile, DC's universe was falling apart. Their films were disconnected in tone, critics panned them, and even the directors weren't fully on board due to studio interference. It was, quite literally, a dark time for DC fans. So why am I reminding you of all that? Well, let's jump ahead to today, to the year 2025, and see how unbelievably the tables have turned. Right now, James Gunn's DCU is off to a strong and promising start, while the MCU is leaning heavily on the Avengers franchise, the very same franchise they beautifully concluded back in 2019 in an attempt at a comeback. It's like watching two boxers switch places, one tired and clumsy after years of dominance, the other fresh and energized after years of struggling. Here's a really interesting difference that shaped their futures. Marvel tied absolutely everything into one grand canon. Whether it was a movie, a short film, or even a Disney Plus show, everything had to connect. At first, this was genius. It made fans feel like every ticket they bought mattered, every after-credits scene meant something, every small detail would eventually pay off. But DC took a different approach. While they attempted the DCEU with interconnected films, they also weren't afraid to make standalone projects. The Batman trilogy by Matt Reeves, for example, exists outside of James Gunn's DCU. Joker and its musical sequel are also completely separate. This segmented approach means DC can appeal to different fan bases at once. Hardcore fans who want continuity can follow the DCU storyline, while casual fans can enjoy the Batman without worrying about whether it fits. It's freedom. Marvel, on the other hand, put itself in a straitjacket. Everything had to be canon, everything had to lead to the next phase. And when continuity becomes the master, creativity takes a back seat. After Endgame, Marvel was at the highest point any studio could ever dream of. They had the goodwill of fans, the loyalty of critics, and the cultural momentum of a juggernaut. But then, Disney made a pivot, and here's where things start to unravel. In 2019, Marvel revealed Phase 4 at Comic-Con, dozens of projects, sequels, and fresh heroes. The hype was real, but then came the pandemic. Production stopped, theaters shut down, everything froze. By late 2020, Marvel restarted, but their strategy had changed. Disney Plus would now become central. The first shows were fantastic. WandaVision was bold and weird, Loki was playful and philosophical. Fans thought Marvel could actually use streaming to explore smaller, riskier stories, but then Disney made the fateful choice. All shows would be canon. Suddenly, the casual fan who only watched 2 movies a year was left behind. If you didn't keep up with 5 different series, you were lost. Who had that kind of time? Worse, the shows started to feel less like art and more like content. You could feel the corporate hand pushing quantity over quality. For every success like Moon Knight, there were forgettable misfires like She-Hulk. Fans didn't want to watch hours of filler just to understand the next Avengers movie. This corporate-first approach drained Marvel's magic. What used to feel like a creative universe now felt like a factory line. Now let's look at DC. They had their disasters, the Justice League debacle, Suicide Squad controversies, and the overhyped Black Adam. Warner Bros. Literally marketed Dwayne Johnson as the savior of the franchise, promising he would change the hierarchy of power in the DC universe. Spoiler, he didn't. But instead of trying to patch up the broken DCEU, they did something bold. They ended it. And they handed the keys to one man, James Gunn. Gunn's vision is fresh because it doesn't chase Marvel. He embraces humor, real emotion, comic book weirdness, and bold villains. His Peacemaker series proved DC could be funny, heartfelt, and violent all at once. Fans loved it, and now with the DCU reboot, there's genuine optimism for the first time in years. And here's the genius move. DC didn't kill their standalones. The Batman continues. Joker 2 continues. These projects coexist alongside the DCU, giving audiences variety. Where Marvel says everything must be canon, DC now says, let's experiment. That's why audiences feel excited again. Now let's talk about the fans. Marvel fans and DC fans behave very differently online. Marvel fans turned the MCU into meme culture. Remember how I Am Inevitable and Avengers Assemble flooded the internet? Meanwhile, DC fans were relentless campaigners. They fought for the Snyder Cut for years, and against all odds, they actually won. WB released Zack Snyder's 4-hour version of Justice League on HBO Max in 2021. That's proof of how powerful DC fandom can be. But here's the catch. Sometimes that passion turns toxic, with endless Marvel vs. DC wars on Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube comments. Ironically, these battles only prove how much people care. Another big contrast lies in the heroes themselves. Marvel had to create icons out of B-list characters. Before 2008, Iron Man was not a household name, neither was Thor. Marvel turned them into legends through consistent storytelling. DC, on the other hand, started with gods, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, instantly recognizable, instantly marketable, but this was both a blessing and a curse. Audiences held DC films to impossible standards. If a Batman movie wasn't The Dark Knight, it was seen as a failure. That's why the standalone strategy helps. Reeves the Batman doesn't have to compete with the Justice League, it just needs to tell its own story. Now let's dig into something Marvel rarely gets credit for: villains. Outside of Thanos, Loki, and maybe Killmonger, most Marvel villains were forgettable. They were often mirror versions of the hero. Same powers, less personality. Yellow Jacket, Malekith, Taskmaster, all examples of wasted potential. DC, however, thrives on villains. The Joker has multiple iconic portrayals. The Riddler in the Batman was chilling. Harley Quinn stole the spotlight. Lex Luthor, Bane, Zod. Love them or hate them, they're memorable. James Gunn, being the villain guy, knows this. His villains are bizarre, layered, and often more interesting than the heroes. That's one reason fans are excited for the DCU. Tone matters too. Marvel's tone became formulaic. Quips, jokes, rinse and repeat. DC under Gunn is embracing tonal diversity. Some projects are dark, The Batman, some are absurd, Peacemaker, and some aim to bring hope, Superman legacy. Variety keeps things fresh. Another trend worth mentioning is the multiverse. Marvel made it a central selling point. Spider-Man No Way Home was a nostalgic event, Doctor Strange 2 leaned heavily on multiverse cameos, and Loki teased Kang and infinite timelines. But over time, fans started seeing it as a gimmick. Cameos replaced storytelling. DC also tried with The Flash, bringing back Michael Keaton's Batman and Christopher Reeve's Superman through CGI. But it backfired, fans weren't impressed, and it bombed at the box office. Both studios show us the same lesson. The multiverse is fun, but without strong stories, it's just empty fan service. Let's talk numbers. Marvel movies post-Endgame still made money, but the cracks showed. Thor: Love and Thunder and Ant-Man 3 underperformed critically. Even big releases like Doctor Strange 2 didn't have the staying power of earlier phases. DC had disasters too. The Flash was one of the biggest box office bombs in superhero history. But interestingly, movies like Zack Snyder's Justice League and The Suicide Squad earned cult followings, even without smashing the box office. The lesson? Cultural impact now matters more than ticket sales. People talk about the Batman 2 years later, but who's still talking about Eternals? Finally, let's ask, what happens if the superhero bubble bursts? There's growing fatigue. Audiences feel oversaturated. The constant cycle of sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and cameos is starting to lose steam. Marvel especially feels the weight of more. DC might survive this better because of its segmented strategy. If audiences tire of shared universes, DC can still deliver one-off hits like Joker. Marvel doesn't have that flexibility yet. So, in conclusion, it's ironic, isn't it? Back in 2016, Marvel was unstoppable and DC was stumbling. Today, in 2025, DC is thriving under James Gunn's leadership, while Marvel is struggling to rediscover its soul. Marvel once thrived because everything connected. Now that same strategy threatens to drown them. DC once failed because nothing connected. Now its segmented freedom has become its superpower. The lesson is clear: fans don't want more content, they want better content. If you want to know more, check out this video where I have explained why Peacemaker succeeded and WandaVision failed. That's all from me for now. I'll see you again in the next one. Until then, bye-bye.